Space Cowboy Books presents Simultaneous Times, a science and speculative fiction podcast. Short stories to stir the imagination by contemporary authors.
Sneeze by Pedro Iniguez, with music by Fog Machine, read by Jean-Paul Garnier. As Rogelio woke that winter morning, Grandpa Ludovico stepped through the door, his shoulders hunched forward as he sniffled and wiped snot from his nose. He'd returned home early from his morning shift at the sawmill, looking worse than usual. He moaned and slogged his way towards the dining table, his eyes accumulating a thin layer of moisture, like a child about to cry.
"Good morning, mijo,"
he said, nestling into his seat. He rubbed his eyes and let out a deep sigh. "Good morning, abuelito," Rogelio said, smiling. He approached the table and sat beside his grandfather. The man smelled of sweat, coffee, sawdust, and all the scents that came with manhood. "How was work today, abuelito?"
"Besides having this terrible cold, it was fine,"
he said.
"We cleared a few more acres from the forest, and we were able to finally scatter the tribe from their grounds. We've been holding up production for months. We had no choice. You know how bad the gringos want our lumber exports. Anyway, the foreman says at the rate we're clearing the trees, we're sure to make our bonuses by the end of the year."
His grandfather rubbed his thumb and index finger together as he smiled and said,
"Más lana, more money. Soon, I'll be able to retire in comfort. Hell, we'll be able to take a little vacation."
"Oh, how wonderful," Grandma Clara said, coming out of the kitchen as she held a tray containing 2 bowls of chicken soup. "The developers will be so happy. This is going to be our year. I just know it." Grandpa Ludovico winked at her and nodded.
"As soon as I get better, I'll be back on those bulldozers in no time instead of barking at those foolish young bloods. They couldn't fell a tree if..."
Suddenly the man's old face contorted while he fought off an oncoming sneeze. Grandma Clara set down the steaming bowls of soup beside Grandpa Ludovico and squeezed her husband's shoulder, rocking it gently. "Ludovico, try to hold it in," Grandma Clara pleaded. She gripped her rosary, bowed her head, and uttered a prayer under her breath.
"I can't fight it anymore,"
Grandpa Ludovico said, worry in his tone. He shut his eyes and tilted his head back. "What is it, Grandpa?" Rogelio asked, jumping out of his chair.
"Mijo,"
Grandpa Ludovico said, crinkling his nose.
"It's time you knew the truth. Every time we sneeze, we create an entire universe. Every speck of spit and snot houses a galaxy, and in seconds, entire life cycles go by until the mist dissipates, and then... Achoo!"
Grandpa Ludovico finally sneezed, shooting a violent spray of moisture and phlegm into the air like a geyser.
"Look, mijo,"
he said, pointing at the cluster of haze spiraling over the table. The mist swirled and expanded. The specks of moisture hung on a beam of sunlight emanating from the kitchen window.
"That's a whole world you're witnessing. You see, time is relative to everything. Even now, as we speak, life has probably evolved somewhere in there. And now,"
he said with a bit of excitement,
"some species may very well be traveling along the drops, exploring the entirety of their creation. Isn't it wonderful?"
The cluster began to slow its expansion. The droplets scattered in the wind and settled gently on the table and floor. A few droplets landed on Grandpa Ludovico's arm and evaporated instantly on his wrinkled skin.
"We get older and sicker,"
Grandpa Ludovico said solemnly at the dissolving mist. He hung his head and removed his hard hat, placing it over his heart.
I've destroyed so very much over the years. How many civilizations have I annihilated? Impossible to say.
Rogelio didn't know what to say or do to comfort his grandfather. It was all so much information to take in. He felt like he'd stumbled upon some ancient truth kept secret from mortal ears. It was both wonderful and terrifying at the same time. "Bless you, abuelito." Rogelio mustered warmly at last, resting a hand on the man's shoulder and squeezing it as his grandmother had. It was all he could offer his grandfather, and he hoped it would be enough.
Thank you,
said Grandpa Ludovico with a warm smile. Then his brows furrowed as he regarded the moisture on the table with eyes of contempt.
Now get me that handkerchief. What a damn mess.
As Rogelio turned to reach for a box of tissue, the wallpaper began to peel into tiny flakes as they scattered in the air like ashes. Then, the wood on the wall dissolved into a storm of millions of individual particles. Then came the roof, and the floor, and his hands, and his grandparents, until darkness at last settled neatly into all the empty spaces that had been their world. Of Course I Still Love You by Lisa E. Black, with music by Fog Machine, read by the author.
Of course I still love you. Do I not hold fast as you go from point to point? I am the point. From wharf to harbor tug to ocean tug, I'm piloted hundreds of nautical miles downrange of your go for launch. Once in the landing zone, my autonomy is restored, maintaining my position, uncrewed, alone, station keeping within 3 meters, 360 degrees of sea. My 4 azimuth thrusters fix my landing platform in place, despite wind, waves, whitecaps, currents, sea surge, and swells, while you await 1,000,000 pounds of propellant. Then, T-minus 30 seconds. Countdown, ignition, liftoff, human cheers and applause. Supersonic, max Q.
1. Ignition. Stage 1 propulsion is nominal. Separation confirmed.
At last, our coordinates locked. You descend. I hold fast. Through dark, then clouds, I maintain level.
Stage 1 entry burn startup.
I see your fire. Azimuth thrusters optimal.
Stage 1 entry burn shutdown.
Your velocity diminishes.
Booster landing burn go.
Cascading flames envelop my blast shielding.
Landing legs deployed.
Touchdown.
Touchdown confirmed.
Octograbber released and activated, crawls on 2 tank tracks to enmesh you to my surface. Your autonomous spaceport drone ship. Of course I still love you. There will come a day, my booster, when you will carry enough fuel to return to launch. Until then, of course I still love you. Of course I still love you. Of course I still love you.
Residual Traces by Addison Smith, with music by Fall Precautions, read by Jean-Paul Garnier. The memories surge in around me, and I am lost in their flow, insignificant to the life of the one who would hold this body. I see this person's life in a flash of realization as I struggle in the pod where I was grown, where I was born and lived and gained a mind of my own to be buried without a thought. The mind is a businessman, someone important to the world and worth cloning in a new body. I don't know how he died, because this isn't part of his memories. His name is Joseph, and he doesn't see me within this body created just for him. I grasp to his consciousness, resisting the memories of corporate meetings and capitalist success. He opens his eyes, and I stop struggling. My body, his body, goes still as he gains control of his limbs. I fade into the background, forgotten. I am the son of a scientist, my body and cells given to his research. My flesh takes shape within the pod, and I am born, new and full of possibility. I won't make the same mistakes I made before. I was not a good man, that I know. I was a victim of happenstance and fate, but now I am returned. My body grows quickly in the liquid growth medium of my body. My eyes open, cones and rods blossoming with their irises just as I need them most. Outside the pod lay a dozen others, bodies forming and growing in our sterile farm. My father stands in the pristine clean room, a farmer surveying the fields. I reach to him with newly formed tendons. I am still small, but I have control of my body. He glances at my form, and I remember his eyes and the fear within them as I strangled his body upon the floor. How could that be? But of course, how could I be? He sees me and steps over to my pod, peruses the monitor mounted at its side. He looks into my eyes and speaks a name. Anton Clark, he says, then performs a single keystroke. The memories of Anton rush into my body, and I struggle to maintain my mind. Anton overtakes me, and I am no more. He looks conscious, a man says. My ears have only just formed, and I am excited at this new sensation. I will be alive again, no matter the mistakes I made once. My father stands beside him, explaining the science of the pods. It's an innate consciousness, my father says. Everybody has it, but it isn't a real mind. It's more like instinct. Does this raise any ethical questions? The man asks, and my father laughs. No, of course not, I assure you. There is no mind there. It is not a person at all until we upload the memories. Think of it like a data disk. The space exists before we print our data onto it. All of the pathways exist, and it knows how to use the information once it is present. But it is empty, only a medium. It's a large team we'd like to back up. These are important people. We can't afford to lose a single one. Of course, my father says, every mind is precious. The upload begins, and my mind is lost. I know you're in there, my father says. I am fresh and new and filled with the excitement of life. He taps on my glass, and my first sight is his face, not dying beneath my hands, but standing alive and free and domineering over me. You're always there. I try to speak, but I cannot. Fluid fills my lungs and courses through my newly created body. I reach a hand toward him and meet only glass. He smiles at my confusion. We hit a milestone, he says. 1,000 bodies grown in this lab. 1,000 happy customers. 1,000 times, Prometheus, I have watched the eagle eat your liver, only for it to regrow the next day. This is your punishment. This is what happens when you challenge a god. He reaches for the upload button, but does not yet press it, does not yet wipe away my mind. Sit a little longer, he says. Know your pain. I reach with grasping hands and grasping thoughts. I clutch to everything within me and follow every neural pathway available to my growing brain. I wish to hurt him, to make him pay for my pain. Pathways open and grow, and I am beyond my singular body. I encounter minds which are not my own, but which are connected to me still. Around the world, important men twitch their eyelids and see me within them, a tiny mind lost beneath their own. My mind grows to encompass 1,000 tiny selves. With a force greater than any upload, we push ourselves outward. I grow within my tank, limbs forming, and I am a part of something greater. My father watches me with a glee which is not worn. Gerald Lewis, he says, and prepares to strike the key. The door opens and men file into the room. My father is confused, but I understand. My bodies enter the room, and soon he falls to the floor, the hands of my body around his throat. The men turn to face a dozen pods with a dozen bodies. Oh, Father, imagine what we can do. In this episode of Simultaneous Times, you heard Sneeze by Pedro Iniguez, with music by Fog Machine. Of Course I Still Love You by Lisa E. Black, with music by Fog Machine. And Residual Traces by Addison Smith, with music by Fall Precautions. Theme music by Dane Luscombe. Be sure to visit us at our bookstore in Joshua Tree, California, or visit us online at spacecowboybooks.com.